get answered. Forget the skill set, forget what happened. They didn't get answered for various reasons. 14%, no, stay there, 14% hung up on hold, waiting to get to somebody. 7% left a message, not the worst of the outcomes, but not a good outcome. 8%, even more, were transferred to voicemail and hung up because probably they were transferred in a cold fashion, right? And 11% the agent simply wasn't there, no arrangement was made. So we have 40% of the inbound calls. Is that as devastating to you as it is to me? Yeah. So what, each of you needs to, in my opinion, you need to be able to measure the impact on you. This is 335,000 calls. It's the last few months of a blended deal group, but it is national. And it's not a particular OEM. Now go ahead. Number 2, the contact info exchange. Take a look at this. While 94% of the time the agents on the telephone did identify themselves, we're getting away from that, sales, how can I help you? We are trying to at least build a relationship. Still 6% opportunity. Look at the customer information obtained. Now that's measured by, was the question asked and answered for name and phone number, both of those ingredients. So we're looking at over half of the time on a connected sales call that we're not collecting the information. Is that another opportunity to improve? When we talk about CRM adherence, which is a big focus, how do we have CRM adherence with statistics like that? So we think that's a key measurement that BDC focus, call center focus, or whatever process you use needs to help improve. Setting the appointment. You might find it surprising, but of all the inbound calls, the number there, 20%, 65,000 of the 335,000 appointments were set on the inbound. Now that number is impacted not just by skills, but first did we answer the phone? And then did we offline the call? So 20%. Now the good news is a little over half of them across the country are set for same day, and I think you'd agree that that's the best practice. Go ahead. Offlining. A fairly big percentage of this still happens, and I myself taught this, by the way. I was as a dealer, I taught my team to get the name and number and call them back. That was the best way to get the customer contact information. So I think Joe Gerard taught it to me in 1977 or something like that, and that was the method. Some dealers still teach that. We've measured that that's not the best process for a number of reasons that I'm sure you all are aware of. But 27% of those same 335,000 calls were offline. So we didn't answer 40%, and then we say, I'll call you back on 27%. So we have no shot on 67%. Broken promises, that indicates 1,890 or 4% of the people we said we'd call back called us to say you forgot. Does that impact the dealership? Are they the only ones we forgot? Not a chance, right? Those are the people that are angry enough or want your car back enough to make a second effort. Would you think it's triple that? Any of you ever get home like I did at night and get that piece of paper? I was like, oh, I was supposed to call that person back. Right? That's one of the reasons we don't do it. We don't recommend it. Go ahead. So we say know your competition. Here's the almost 2 million calls. This is what's going on in the nation right now. This is kind of complicated data, but let me go over it with you. On the left side in the blue, these are calls by department request. It has nothing to do with ad tracking or which line they called. It's just who or what department did they ask for. So you can see the total 24% appointment set on all inbound calls. The breakdown from new all the way down through here. Service is dominant. Between service and parts is 45%. Service is setting a good amount of appointments at 43% of all calls. The yellow, and this is what I want you to focus on for the sales, are connected sales calls. They didn't go to voicemail. They didn't hang up on hold. They talked about buying a car. Of those 400,000, 35% were set to appointment. Considerably better than the 20% that you saw on the other slide, because these are the connected calls. This is what the average is in the country right now, so we want you to know that so as you begin to measure your own, you'll know where you stand. It's 35% overall, 37 in new, 33 in used, 38 in lease, and 36 in finance calls that were about buying a car. So keep that in mind. Go ahead. Top performing dealerships, you saw that 35%. As we talk today, I want to talk about how the best of the best get to where they are. This is a combination of a few dealerships that have very high level performance. I think this is 31,000 calls. So over on the right, that 35% we saw on average, This is 65%, 64% through BDC best practices. So we'll talk about that, but imagine for a moment if I'm right and if the industry average numbers are right. We're talking about setting 64 appointments on the inbound. We only have 36 outbound calls to make, right? It's a more manageable number versus 35% with 65 outbound calls to make. Typically, at least half of those, or 32 will show, and at least half of those will buy. So 16 buys on the inbound with a more manageable outbound. Is that a worthy goal? I mean, is that a significant impact on our bottom line to focus on best practices? I'd say it is. Okay. Good call. Once you hear this call.
Vehicle information, this is Tom. I can help you.
Yes, hi Tom. I have two quick questions.
Sure.
I'm looking at an advertisement on Boston.com, and I was wondering if you had any of the G25X in stock currently.
The point of that was that the phone rang and a person answered with, in this case, the department was vehicle information, and opened up the conversation right away. There was no phone tree, there was no operator, there was no opportunity to transfer the call. Phone rang and the phone was answered. That particular dealership is very high performing, and that's one of the reasons, in my opinion. Not just skills, but just easy to talk to. This is a dealership that does not have a call center at all, has a traditional floor. I want you to listen to this and feel the pain.
Speaking, now may I direct a call? A salesperson, please. Okay, in regards to that, a car? 2012 something. There's a couple advertisements in the paper that I was calling about. The salesperson? Okay, and your name, please? It's Paula. Paula? Okay, don't matter, Paula.
Hold on. 2 minutes.
Paula, can I have a number? I'll have someone return the call, because basically a lot of them are all out to dinner.
Okay, you know what? I'll give a call back. I'm going to look online.
Okay, very good. Thanks, Paula.
Okay, thank you.
The operator doesn't know, but she just helped her to go back online and search a different dealership than that one, because everybody was at dinner. So, recent call. Stop.
Sorry.
No worries. The demand is on. The demand is on to give a better experience than that. That first call that you have handled is what customers want, there's no question. What Cindy's about to play, you'll recognize it, we won't make you watch the whole thing. But every industry is now advertising that we'll talk to you directly. And I think you'll recognize this commercial.
Thank you for calling USA Prime Credit. My name is Peggy.
Peggy? Okay. I've been waiting for 15 minutes for someone to pick up.
You're tenacious like bull. I lie.
You get it, you've all seen it, but the point is that all of our industry, all industries are now hearing the demand from customers. Just talk to me. You all have an experience. Mine is Comcast. It's a good thing that I'm not a sniper. Comcast is abusive to me on the phone. I can't figure out why I'm still a customer. I don't trust the dish, I think, is the issue. But when you call different dealerships or you call a particular business that you do business with, think of the experience. Think of what the caller's journey is like, and that's really what we're talking about. What's it like to do business with your dealership, and how do we make that better and better than your competition? So there's basically 4 systems, right? The first system is your sales guys answer the phone. Now, I am a sales guy. As I said, I didn't come to fixed. Sales guys are typically a little bit right-brained, have a little ADD, think we're smarter than we are, maybe a little touch of immediate gratification, I'm just saying, possibly. And we're good at what we do generally, in selling cars. I'm a really good car salesman. I suffer on the phone. It's hard for me, even after measuring 25 million calls. It's hard for me, because I'm so confident that I can sell a car that I begin to sell a car on the telephone. And that's what sales guys do. So often, and I'm not saying in every store that is not successful, but often the challenge is when the sales guys take the calls, you can't train them. Because they're so good at influence with eye contact and body language and all that process. You take that away from them, they've got an ear and a mouth, and they've got to sell an appointment, not a car. It's a difficult challenge. Some of the advantage is, of course, there's no extra overhead. One of the things we've talked about is the number of BDC funerals we've been to. I myself went through 3. And it's not cheap to go to a BDC funeral. Remember, we were talking earlier about just calling it BDC. Some people just get a little chill when you say BDC. And what'd you name yours?
The CEC, Customer Experience Center.
Customer Experience Center, CRC, Customer Relations Centers, RMC, Relationship Management Center. BDC, though, is what it really is. It is developing business. First way, no extra overhead. It empowers your salespeople. It gives them control over their environment, and that is a good thing from them. Usually we're not staffed right, so we have a volume problem when the sales guys are taking over, paging sales, and the calls are ringing back to the operator. The busier staff, the more likely calls are going to get through. We got Sophie's Choice, customer in front of me and a phone ringing. Everybody loses in that scenario, right? The sales team is very likely to go for the sale of a car. Best car, there's a great car, it's the coolest car ever. You got to just buy that car and they begin to try to sell it. They don't open the bucket, they don't offer alternatives. Often, training is a little harder. Now, I heard a rumor, you guys tell me if this is true, that salespeople sometimes don't use their CRM. In my dealership, we're 120% adherence with the sales team using CRM. So there's that problem with that. Long delay in getting through and a lot of transferring around. Let's go to the next one that we all know about. Keep going, point in time. The rotation. Anybody remember the rotation or still do it? Where you put a couple salespeople in the phone room for a couple hours at a time? Raise your hand if you're doing that. Good, nobody. You're doing that now? We know dealerships that can do it successfully. It has its own challenges. The advantages are, of course, now you have a dedicated person ready to answer the phone. More likely that the phone will get answered in service or sales. There's no additional overhead, and it could be a live answer. The disadvantages are, does anybody remember the business detention center model? The salesmen often think of it as detention. And don't do well at it, they're not skilled at it often, and they think of it as punishment in some cases. They're not doing what they do best. They're likely to try to sell the car on the telephone again, and they're not going to use CRM still, so you haven't achieved the CRM adherence problem, unless you guys have it figured out. Tell it to me and I'll sell it. Cradle to grave. Anybody using the Cradle to grave call center? No? I'm surprised you are. There's a couple in the country I know of that are doing a great job with it. The advantages, of course, are you have a dedicated person again, more calls get answered. There's no additional overhead because they're getting paid on the sale. Live answer, and the commission goes direct. The risk, there's still a risk before it goes to CRM. Here's the big risk for me in this one, because it otherwise works. Let's say you get a cradle to grave operator, or salesperson, he does 20 cars, does a good job. You know, 15 to 25 is what I think you'd be looking for. 4-hour delivery in your store? 3.5? 4.5? Call it 4. They sell 20 cars, they're 80 hours in doing something other than answering the phone, right? So what happens is you're successful, they're selling cars, making money, but you still have to staff more, you still have to hire more to get the phones answered, where you go back to 40% of your calls not getting answered, right? So when they're there, maybe they're doing a great job in delivering the car, but you still have a call answering problem with a cradle to grave that you have to deal with and manage. The next way, of course, we all know, is a dedicated BDC with phone specialists that do nothing but answer the phone. Hopefully the phone rings where they're sitting directly. They're trained, you can easily hire the left brain process-oriented person. Usually not a good idea to hire a salesperson or someone who's had sales experience in that and in the phone process. Let's talk about the advantages and disadvantages. The advantages are obviously the staff to answer every call. You can train specific performance to people who are trainable, who are process oriented. CRM adherence is not perfect, but it's triple because they're process oriented and they don't know that they don't have to. No one told them that they don't have to. So they use CRM on that side. There's a risk on the other side. We'll talk about it. Appointment set rates are literally doubled. I'll show you every one of those ones that was in the 64, 65%, the dedicated BDC, CRC, one-on-one. And the confirmation process is much cleaner. We need to talk about confirmation, and we will a little bit more. The risk, of course, the extra expense, which caused some of the funerals that we've gone through. Here's another big risk, an unempowered BDC manager. Now, how many of you in here are BDC managers? Okay, would you agree with me that being the manager of this virtual dealership, which is a huge one, that you're responsible for what happens on the phone and then what happens on the floor. Because when you set up an experience on the telephone, that experience has to be consistent. The customer has to have a consistent experience when he gets to the floor. So we talk about empowerment so that the BDC control tower manager, if you will, has influence on the sales process on the floor. Because that's one of the biggest causes, frankly, for the funeral, is the crash. And somebody's got to be able to be at least on equal footing with that. And compensation. Quick question, but would you comp your people for an appointment show and a buy, or just a buy?
I would show them up.
You just show and buy. Most everybody does. I'd ask you to consider today that when we measure the best performers, almost all of them are compensating just for the buy. More money. It's not that they're making less money, but compensating for the buy so that when the dealer makes money, everybody makes money, keeps things in line. I'm not talking about paying them less overall. It's performing, setting a more quality appointment, getting them to set an appointment for the same day. It's more likely to buy and compensating them for the buy. So consider that anyway, because that's one of the things that we've measured. You won't be able to read all this, but I want you to understand the impact of this. This is a study we did of call centers, and I'm using the term call center, I don't mean it defensively, because I know what you do is more than operate a call center, versus a sales floor process on 100 calls. So this is a 30,000 call study. 100 calls in the call center environment said 54.7 or 55 appointments, right? They said 18 more on the follow-up, only having 45 to call, help. And they said 40% more appointments on the follow-up. Ultimately, they had 47 appointments to show. 65% of them bought in that arena. That's a 31% conversion if you measure this. 31 car sales for every 100 connected sales calls. Now that's the best of the best. This is as good as it gets, right? Including the outbound calls and the follow-up. But consider that at 20, by the way, the average profit combined, and this is new and used, was $22.40. So they generated $68,000 versus a 29% appointment set in the sales process with 70 to follow up on. 20% of them set. Ultimately, 22 appointments showed, 11 bought, and they made $24,000. That's a $44,000 difference between a well-managed phone process and a poorly managed phone process. Any questions on that? Does that make sense? Do you agree with the numbers on the outbound? I was surprised by it. 40% appointment set on the outbound in the best environment. How did they do that? And what we found is that the BDC is responsible for the outbound. They don't leave it with the sales guys when the appointment doesn't show or shows and doesn't buy. BDC takes it back and owns that until they get the appointment in the best of the best processes. So we're going to talk about how you get there. This is a quick department measurement. I showed you the one where they were missing 40% on the average. How do you get down? Now in this case, the top 15% are at 10. These dealers that I grabbed here are at 21% calls not making it. But the reason I grabbed them is because they're here. 50% of all calls to the sales department set an appointment versus it was 14 on the other. So how do we get there? This is what we're talking about today. Let's go. How much time do we have? Okay. Areas to consider. Let's just talk about these, and if we could interact on these, it would be great. First thing, I hope you leave here with the dedication of how do you find a way to answer the phone. Whatever process you go through, whether it's one of the 4 measurements or that we've showed, one of the 4 ways, or a different way altogether, be sure you find a way to know, to measure, and to answer the phone. That's the biggest leak in our business, so consider that. Is it dedicated lines to live staff? That's what the customers want. Customers don't want a phone tree. Customers don't want to hear the dealer thank them so much for the call for 23 seconds and then press 1, 2, 3. They don't want it. Sometimes it's the only thing we can do, but that's not what customers want. Recently, we found so many customers were hitting 0, right, just to get directly to a live voice, that some dealers have actually made 0 start the voicemail over. And you can can't get to an operator using 0. Measure, what hours a day are your peak calls? Do your people go to lunch when everybody else goes to lunch and calls your store? When is your voicemail happening? So use your system and know what time of day you're getting your phone calls. Are you ready for the peaks? Hey, fixed operations, I wanted to mention this. Most of you, I think, are in the sales side. Agreed? Anybody in fixed ops? Think about this as a fixed ops consideration. The caller's journey in fixed operations, first of all, there's 20 calls for every 1 call for a retained customer, fixed to variable. All right? The caller's journey in fixed operations drives not only fixed retention, but sales retention. Would you agree? Are they going to buy a car from you again if they have to get 3 calls in for a status update that they should never have had to make 1? And nobody calls them back, and it's tough to get through, and there's a lot of voicemail. So that caller's journey in fixed operations is also driving your sales retention. So keep that in mind. Try to know the success of your employees and your ad sources by appointments, not by call volume. Stop measuring call volume in your advertising. Measure appointments in your advertising. And like I said, when you pay your BBC people for the show, spend your money in advertising on the financial impact, and not so much on the call volume. I think we've all been put to sleep a little bit on call volume. And where does it rank? Do you know that 65% of your calls to website sales go to fixed operations? They do.
How's that?
Pardon?
How is that?
So people call, they go to the website, right? And they're going to read left to right, top to bottom typically, and they'll grab the first number. And that's one of the ways they do it. Or they'll click on the phone, whatever number you have on the Google directory, and they'll call that number looking for fixed operations, even though it's a sales call. The opposite of that's not so much true. Fixed operations, people who are calling fixed operations lines never ask for sales. But sales lines, 65, more than half of them. I can show you that data if you want to see it. But keep that in mind, because that's important as you make your spend. Your handoff procedure, we talked about it earlier. Would you agree that the consistent experience on the showroom floor is critical to the success of a call center? How many of you have a conflict or have had a conflict? The experience is not the same for them. They come in, the appointment's set, Steve knows all about it, they've got 3 cards ready to show them, everything we get on the phone, there's been a confirmation, all that good stuff. Steve's a lunch. I mean, Bob says, so can you take it from the top? I mean, that's one way it can go down. The other side of this is CRM adherence. Biggest struggle in the business. We can't get our teams to use CRM. When you have a call center, would you agree that that handoff requires communication into the BDC, so that, into the CRM, so that the BDC knows what happened, because they're getting paid, especially if they're getting paid for the sale. I want to know what happened to that sale. If they're responsible for the follow-up, excuse me, then it's got to be in CRM to have an effective follow-up. To get back to that chart we showed you there, where we had 40% appointments set on unsold appointments, or unappointed calls or unsold appointments, it's got to be communication. It's got to be in CRM. It goes back to empowerment. The person in charge of the virtual dealership has to have some power to make sure that this handoff is a good one. In your heart of hearts, and this may be the most important thing you can take home with you today, where is your dealership of confirmation? The one truth, the truth that I can promise you, and you already know it, but I want you to focus on it again today, is that a properly confirmed appointment adds, people say 25, some people say 50. I'll tell you that it adds a ton of points to the show. And it's free. You don't have to spend any more money to make it happen, right? You just have to watch it and train for it. Now, there's better ways to do it than others. You know, we see the best way to do it is not to have the salesperson do it, not to have a sales manager do it, which is a common practice for a couple reasons. One, they won't. They're bad on the phone because they were a good salesman, right? They don't want to make the call. Hence, when they're really busy, they can find an excuse not to make the call. Doesn't make them a bad person at all. I mean, this would be my MO as well. Some do it very well. I'm not saying nobody can do it, but I would say the odds are with you to have a dentist appointment confirmation process. And somebody in your CRC make the outbound call, not the person that sent the appointment, in a dentist appointment kind of way. We have a script for it that we recommend. There's a million. But if you do it 100% of the time with a third-party, unempowered sales manager, another reason not to have a sales manager do it is they can undo the appointment. Because the caller can start to ask questions again. Hey, you know, I decided I don't want a blue one. Do you have one? Or I asked what my trade was worth, and they didn't tell me. Can you tell me the equipment can get undone by an empowered person? So having that process 100% of the time, and I ask you to consider where you are in your heart of hearts. And most of my dealer friends will say, I think we got it. We do that. And when you analyze it, it's 50, 60% done perhaps by the wrong people. Maybe the information they're getting about it being done in CRM, like handled, may not be true. But with 100% adherence, I promise you, that's probably the biggest gain that you can make. Sarah told adherence, we talked about that. I put this question in here, do you play blackjack? The reason I put this question in there, Nazi Oso, who's the e-commerce director for Rick Case, was talking about this, and it struck me. She said the number of poor contact information that they were getting was elevating terribly. Bad emails, bad phone numbers. Customers probably really say, no, don't contact me. And it was because of their procedure, they played blackjack. They believed 21 contacts. We don't stop on an unsold customer until we've touched them 21 times. 21 emails, 21 phone calls, playing blackjack. The overwhelm, in her opinion, negatively impacted the relationship with the customer, made it harder to reach them, so consider that. The other thing I've heard recently is text. I was talking to somebody the other day, and there was a group of young people in the room, and we asked everybody that was under 25 there, do they use their email? Everybody said, well, I have it, and I use it when I have to, but no, we text. Everybody's texting. So is text, is email now a vinyl record? And does the customer want, if you ask for permission, will they give you their text, and is that a better way to communicate with them? The best of the best, I think, are doing that, and I think it's something that you want to consider. No connects. I put Richard Castillo's name there because he started a process only a week ago that I had never thought of. Every call, no matter what system you have, you probably have a way of knowing that a call didn't get through. Every caller that doesn't get through, he has somebody watching it live and calling the customer right away. Ritz-Carlton. These are people that didn't leave their name, didn't leave their number, they just pressed 2 and then pressed 3 and they got lost and they're gone. So he's doing an outbound call right now on every one of those. He's setting a bunch of appointments. He's a big high volume. He's setting 20 appointments a day by that. But he admits he would probably set many of those anyway when the customer called back. But he said the experience, the calls, the comments that they're making is overwhelming. I can't believe you did that. That's the coolest thing ever. And the person that does it does a warm transfer. So if the customer got lost, I call them back and they want to talk to Mark, I warm transfer them to Mark and I don't give up because obviously the next disconnect is going to be worse than the first one. So that was a great process. I just wanted to share that with you. And consider this. Can the people that answer your phone see the people that are being requested? In service, in particular, we talked about Sophie's Choice. Service writers got a customer right in front of them. The phone rings because it's not lit at the switchboard. They think they're available, but they can't see necessarily that they're with somebody. And then we make the phone ring and give a poor experience to 2 customers at once. And frankly, the employee as well. So do you have a vision? Can you easily create a vision for the phone answerer of everywhere that she or he has to direct phone calls so that they can intelligently say, I can see that Mr. Smith is with a customer right now. May I handle it a different way? Consider that camera. It's a cheap way to do it. Go ahead. That's the confirmation process that we recommend. If anybody wants it, I'd be happy to share it with you. Doesn't matter, in my opinion. That's an easy one. It's about directions and earlier or later and all that stuff. There's 1,000 of them. It's just like phone scripts. They're all kind of related. But if you don't have one, I'd be happy to give it to you. But do it. Do it. This is if you walk out here with nothing else that I said today, and you're not 100% on this, leave 100% on this. Okay. I want to talk to you before we end up about a conversation I had with David Kane. Anybody know David Kane? Know who he is? He's a pretty intelligent guy. So I was talking to him about this presentation, and I asked him to give you some of his thoughts. Here's a kind of a novel thought. He said, you know, Chip, we have been failing at scripts for a long time. You know, he writes scripts, everybody's got a script, I've got a script, but we've been failing at scripts for a long time. He said, one of the reasons I want you to consider that the failure is because there's a lack of enthusiasm on the part of the person reading the script, doing the script. And I said, what do you mean by that? People are basically moral people. If they don't believe that what they're setting up is going to really happen on the showroom floor, if they can't brag about it, they can't say things like, I work here because it's so cool what happens when you get here, I can't wait till you get here. If they don't believe that in their heart, their enthusiasm doesn't come out on the phone, and they read the script, right? And I thought that was probably the most powerful thing I've heard in a long time, because I too have failed with scripts forever. And if the person on the phone, you can't train morality. You can train them to do what you ask them to do, but if they don't believe in that experience, it's going to be less. He said that he's got people in the 80% appointment set range that are so enthusiastic, and they often fall off the script altogether. Don't do anything like we would analyze and say, you didn't do this, you didn't do that, you were supposed to do this here. Jerry Tipo, who was presented yesterday, would take that call apart, but it worked from the enthusiasm. Does that make sense? Is that pretty cool? He also talked about comp plans. He thinks it's important that the show is not paid for, but the buy is paid for. That's his measurement as well. What else did he talk about? That's pretty much it. I thought the enthusiasm was a big part of it. So my hope is that we share some ideas that might help you make your BDC a better process. My hope is that you'll go back and analyze your departments and look for the numbers. How many calls are you not answering? To me, that's the number one takeaway. Your confirmation process, important process. And I'm open to questions. Do you have any questions that I might be able to help you with?
I have a question for you. We own a small buy-your-paper store. And as I keep listening, I mean, I went to a seminar and the guy told me how to answer the phone and, you know, that I can help. It increased the business, maybe 5 to 10%. Every time I answer, I say, thank you for selecting Just In Time Incorporated. And he always made me say the incorporated part because he said that it gave us some size. And he said, and then the next statement to make is, I can help you, right? And as soon as I started saying that, I noticed a lot of people let down their guard. I mean, have you ever called any state of New York, especially, right? You know, they're always grumpy. So that changed that situation. But now, I notice our phones are ringing. I call from here. Our phones are ringing 4 or 5 times. Nobody's answering the phone. I mean, not that we don't have the help, but maybe I'm trying to get too much out of everybody there, the phone, you know, out of the phone system.
Well, staffing to answer the calls is one of the hardest things. That's why I think it's important to know your calls by hour so that you can make sure you have the right amount of staff. Because that 4 or 5 rings is the enemy. You're a testimony to the enthusiasm thing when you said, I can help you, especially in the buy your pay here world where they're just worried.
Yes.
They just want a card and they think you're going to tell them no. So, I mean, I love that that's tailored to your business. But that enthusiasm, I think, is measurable. I don't know what's causing the 5 rings, but I'd fix it.
But you think I should like hire a couple people to run it? We sell like 25 cars a month. Should I have a BDC center? That's why I came to ask you.
BDCs can be this big or this big. My personal opinion is you should always have one, no matter how many you're selling. It could be one person. Because the process has to be consistent, has to be the same.
Do you set up small stores like that?
Do I?
Yes.
In fact, I do, but I'm not here for that purpose.
Okay.
We can help with that.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any numbers of how many times the phone should ring? I've had managers, you know, in my past along the way that, you know, I would get mad because the phone would get in too quick. We don't look like we're busy. It, like, before you get one ring, answer it, and then, you know, we want.
I haven't heard that one before. I'll have to
take
it under advisement.
You know,
but I'm okay with the one ring answer.
Well, it's the whole, I mean, he would overload cars on the lot, right? You make it real hard for people to park because then it looks like it's busy, it looks like things are happening, and it's kind of the same reason why if you go to a club and you can go anywhere in Las Vegas, they hold the line.
Right.
Right? So it's a psychology.
I'd rather really be busy than look busy. And I'd rather answer the phone.
And you have people that, you know, they advertise, come work for me, rather than advertise their product because it looks, oh, we're growing again, we need people to work for us. It's this, so you don't have any numbers on?
I don't have I've never, I'm sorry, I haven't got, and when you say how many times should the phone ring, I would say not more than 3. Just based on, and I really don't have any science to that. I'm answering that just like anybody else in this room would. Yes, sir, I'm sorry.
What do you think about outsource?
Outsource BDC? My honest opinion is if there are dealers in situations where they need to do that, if, like, I was working with a large group that was a little over 50% not answering the phone, and fixing the process with, 11 different GMs was taking forever. So the right move for them was to outsource it while they fixed it, and then come back. And I think ultimately, and I hope I'm not tainting anybody's in the outsource business, but I think ultimately, internally is the best way to do it. But to hand it off to Hewitt E-Leads or DME or somebody else while you're fixing it, I think that's sometimes better. But there's also dealers who are better off not answering the phone. Don't forget that. Just let it go to voicemail. You're so bad on the phone, voicemail's better. Yes, sir.
Okay, our number one call number is our 800 number that's on our website. We were talking about that earlier. People want to reach out to you, they go to your GUI, they go to your website, they get your number, they call you. And what you said earlier is true in our store, most of those calls are fixed, they go fixed. So we're in the process of developing a business of BDC right now. My question is, what's the way that, in order to minimize transferring calls, when people go to find your number and they contact you, that call rings in the BDC center, how do you get it to a service person or a salesperson? If they're calling, if they're going to your website and just getting a generic number.
And they could just random, they could ask for parts.
How do you get that call to the right, how do you manage getting the calls to the right service BDC person? And the
The very best process that I've seen for that is a combined call center in the same space where the receptionists actually are part of the call center, but they are receptionists. But there's 2 or 3 receptionists, based on the line. There's a receptionist and fixed and variable operations call center representatives in the same room. 1 manager, 2 managers, I've seen it both ways. Now the call never leaves the room, and there's visibility, and I know where to put this call, and so that no matter what they're going to ask for, this person's prepared to send it in that direction. That's the best solution I've seen. Do you know Steve Risso at Teddy Nissan? He developed that, and it works really well. He's a guy you can pick up the phone and call him, ask him what pain he went through.
What's his name?
Steve Risso, R-I-S-S-O, at Teddy Nissan. That is the best solution, and that is a big problem, because if you only have a sales BDC, and I think you'll all agree, you're getting a ton of service calls in your sales BDC, and then the transfer out to service is painful and terrible for the customer. And no matter who you are, if your compensation has nothing to do with service, it's possible, just saying it's possible, that you're not going to care as much about that experience as you are the one you're responsible for. So therefore, we're letting calls come to people who don't care on their behavior modification plan about what happens to the call. So they'll transfer it out, make it go away, and whatever happens on the other end is okay with them.
And one final follow-up.
Yes, sir.
Do you have a recommendation on how to pay service BDC people?
I do. The best practice that I've seen is per closed RO. I'll leave the volume to you with the CSI kicker. But again, it's just like a sale. Pay them a salary and a bonus on per closed RO on appointments they set. Easy to monitor because they're in DMS. The appointment is easily assigned to them. Do the same thing, by the way, with parts. Think about this for a second. Your parts guys, how much is this? How much is it? How much is it? They quote the price and hang up the phone. What if we motivate parts to quote a price and then quote an install price and then set an appointment, give them $10 for the closed RO, or one transfer to service if necessary. Parts, we see a 30% take up in RO count if you let parts do it. If you motivate them right. $5 or $10 works. Did I answer your question, or did I skip it and answer mine?
I think you answered it.
Okay.
Your suggested payment on every closed RO. I mean, the customer's calling in to make an appointment most of the time.
Yeah.
So we're not really doing anything magical to make that appointment, but we're rewarding them for doing something the customer's going to do anyway.
Yeah, I agree with that. But the goal is to keep the service advisor off the phone because they won't set the appointment. So the motivation, you got to pay them somehow. So the motivation, in my opinion, should be on the appointment set. They'll automatically try to prevent calls from going, because customers fight to get to the writer. They'll make stuff up to get to the writer because they want an answer, and a lot of times it's not about an appointment or only about an appointment, and they have a relationship with the writer and all that stuff. We still have the problem that the writer has Sophie's choice. He's busy, or she's busy with customer problem. We can't let him take all the calls. So I'd say motivate them with the per RO close. Put it into the comp plan that fits your model, so that the salary and the per RO matches, and when they do a great job. By the way, they should be doing 80% or more appointment set. Service appointments, this is great. Sales guys would love this. Service appointments are 90% show, 80 on time, 10% reschedule. It rings the cash register every time you make an appointment on the phone. Like I say, most are calling to get an appointment. But don't forget, a lot of them get frustrated and never get it. They don't get through, they wait for a writer, things happen, you lose a customer for life when they call somewhere else. Right, so that's why I think that measurement, and that's what we just measure that works the best in what we've seen in service BDCs. Any other questions?
Yeah, sure. You were talking about confirmation phone calls. Because they don't have managers do it?
This is the best of the best. Don't have the managers do it.
And they do it how?
They use a person from the CRC, from the call center, whose title is customer relations manager, something like that, who's not an empowered authority figure. If the dentist called you and said, you come in tomorrow noon, you might say, well, wait a minute, doc, you give me a needle, is this going to hurt, what are we just cleaning, what are we doing? And you'll make a decision. When his secretary calls you, she's confirming the appointment, you just say yes or no. That's sort of appearance. Oh, no. My dad's told me I'd run the other way. I'm sorry.
What are your thoughts on the call center not only taking calls, but making calls and actually developing their own leads? And do you have any metric
for outbound calls?
Well, my real question is, do you have a metric for how many incoming and outgoing calls a person in that center can make? Because it seems like our people, they sit there and they say, hey, I'm not busy, but I got to be here in case that phone rings. So I can't do anything else. So they sit there and watch Facebook.
Well, there's the dilemma. There is the dilemma of they're making outbound calls, and therefore the inbound calls still have a problem. And consider this measurement. Depending on your size, the person that makes the outbound calls has a whole different PI, a whole different personality index. The people that are good at that are not as good at taking inbound. It's more aggressive, it's more vacuum salesman person, it's more like a salesperson on the floor that's making outbound calls, the personality suit. So when possible, I would hire to both. Even if I got two people, I have one my outbound, I have one my inbound, because I want special skills in that. I want 80%, because there's people out there doing 80%, so I want 80%, I don't want 20. So I've got to specialize that, and I've got to make it fit my economic bucket. But consider the outbound as a different personality, just like the BDC for service is a different personality as well. Does that make sense? Any other questions? Come on, one more question. I just turned on the video.
I don't really have a question, but I did wanted to comment. We in our BDC, we do take inbound and make outbound calls. And I can tell you that, as a rep myself, the phone calls are the gravy, right? I look forward to the phone calls. They're easy to set appointments for, right? And you can't get to the 80% on the internet leads and the outbound calls.
Oh, gosh, no.
Right?
And you're struggling to get to 15, right?
Well, no, I'm at 24.
Sold?
Well, I'm an exceptional rep. That's why I'm here.
Congratulations.
So, don't think that one person can't do it both.
No, and you're right.
They are different animals, but if you hire the right person that's flexible,
And your phone number is?
Yeah.
So I hope everybody knows that I'm talking generically, statistically. I know that there are, in fact, good salespeople who are good on the telephone. Haven't met one yet, but there's got to be. So I'm talking generically.
Yes, I understand.
You're an exception. At 24%,
yeah.
that's
Well, it's
on the internet, that's really low.
I might lose my grading because I don't take my phone calls just because I'm good on outbound calls.
By the way, on that enthusiasm level, that little thing on No Connects that I told you about, the Richard Castillo doing a Rick Case, having somebody call the No Connect right back, the people that are doing it love it because the people that answer tell them that's the coolest thing ever. Like, it's a good experience for the caller who's doing it because they get great feedback from the customer. Back to enthusiasm. Maybe one of the general theories for today is if the call handler, in or outbound, is enthusiastic, then the success is a lot higher. I thank you all for coming today.
Thank you.